We're learning Le'ilu Nishmas Yitta Bas Yitzchak Isaac, the mother of Adir Chava Heshi. In the schus of the shir, the Shama should have an aliyah, the Torah should be Malavaha. She was a nice lady. She was a nice lady. She lived to 100 years old. She survived the war. She was a Holocaust survivor. She wasn't in a concentration camp. She was in a work camp. But despite the fact that, listen, she was like to raise a very, very fine family. Shama should have an aliyah. We're up to the Mishnah on Pei Vav Amid Beis. Pei Vav Amid Beis. And we're discussing where they would bring certain, where they bought the wheat from, where they bought the shemen from. Now we're discussing where they bring the wine from the nesachim from. Where would they bring the yayin from? So these are names of places. Keduchim va'atulim, right? Alpha, liyayin. That's the aleph. That's the sugrishan. That's the best. Shnei lehem, what's secondary in quality? Mibes rima, umbes lovan bahar. Ukfar Signa bebika. So a place called Beis Rima, Beis Lavan of the Har, Kfar Signa of the valley, and have in fact Kolaratzas Hayikasheres, Elam Mikan Hayimevian. They were all any place you can bring it from, but these were the superior places where you should bring it from. And similar to the previous Mishnayos, Emevi and Lemi Beis Hazvalim, the field that was irrigated with dung, animal dung, Lemi Beis Hashlachim, or not for a field irrigated by man. Nor from when something grew between them to weaken them. Then heavy caution. In all these cases, if you do bring the sachem from this quality of wine, it will be okay. We're going to see that's sun ripened grapes, sun ripened grapes that they're ripened by the sun. So ein mevian halistein. Then heavy kasha. If you do, it's kasha. These are very sweet. It seems sweet grapes are not good quality. So therefore, since they're not good quality, you don't bring wine from them. But if you do, it's kasha. Emevi and yashan, you don't bring wine from last year, as we're going to see in the Gemara, because it's not as red as it should be. And red is the quality we're looking for. Divrei Rabbi, v'chachamim machshirin to bring yayin that's yashan from the previous year. Emevi and loy masuk, you can't bring wine that's sweet. V'loy ma'ushan, nor smoked. V'loy mavushal, nor cooked. So what's the difference between this masuk and the listaran? This was one was sun dried, and the other one was masuk was not dried by the sun. And this is even inferior quality because it says heavy puzzle. If you bring it, it's puzzle. So again, you get an idea, fellas. The quality of nesachim, it should be red, it should not be sweet, and it should not be cooked. So therefore, you understand by Pesach, these are the qualities we go ahead. We're makbid the chumis on Pesach wine. They may be in hadloyos. You don't bring wine from grapes that grew on a trestle. Elamin haragilios, the ones that grew on the ground. And as the Gemara is going to say, it grew on the ground, and it was worked twice a year, and as a result, it was high quality. Umina kromim ha'avudim, and from kromim that are avudim. So you don't bring from the loyos, you don't bring from regilios, you don't bring from kromos, from vineyards that are what? That are avudim, right? That's twice a year that they're cropped twice a year. So again, it seems I said incorrectly that's a positive. It seems to be a negative. You don't go ahead and put them in big barrels. It seems to be it makes an inferior quality. Small barrels. You don't fill it up because you want it to breathe. You want the wine to breathe, so you don't fill it up to the top. Know that the reach should be what should float. And when you do bring, you don't bring from the opening. Seems the mold would come to the top of wine, so therefore you don't bring wine from the top where the mold is. Nor do you bring from the bottom of the barrel, but from the hashmarim, because of the leads that go ahead, the crushed grapes that sink to the bottom of the barrel, the sediment. You bring it from the third. The easiest way to explain this is that a third of the barrel, which is the middle of the third. In other words, you go to the third of the barrel, and then the middle of that's where you go ahead. Or there's a girsa mishalisha or emsa, which it seems to be similar. Ketzuru baidik. How would they check the wine that is the quality of the wine that is required? Hagizber Yoshev, the Gizber would go ahead and he would sit, and he would have a reed in his hand, and the person would open up the spigot, and the wine would come to begin to pour out. And Zorak Hakir, as soon as the wine began to spew the kir, the junk, Hikish Bikana, he would hit either the person, the machloikas, whether he hit the person or the barrel, and the person would stop it. The Gemara is going to ask, why didn't you tell him stop? Why are you hitting? Why didn't you tell him stop? Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer sheyesh ba kamachim pasel. He argues in the Tanakama. Tanakama said you don't take from the top from kamachim, but the barrel is good. You can take from underneath it. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda is of the opinion if it has kamachim, it has mold in it, it's no good in the beginning. It's no good. You can't use it at all. Right? So that's nafkamina between the two. Shenemar tamimim yiyu lachem min chasam, tamimim yiyu lachem min iskehem. And so in this game should be tamim. They should not have kamachim. They should not have mold. So we're discussing what again the nesachim that were brought, the yain that was brought on mizbeach, and the quality of it. You bring from the middle of the barrel. It should be new, the wine from that year. It should not have mold in it if possible, and it should be from fields that you didn't have any problems growing it. This is the top quality, and it mentioned the names of places that are top quality.
So even though the spigot's in the middle of the barrel, you're still going to get sediment coming out of it. That's why the guy's there with the stick.
Yeah. I guess at one point when it begins to flow out, right? When it begins to flow out, it's going to end up getting some schmutz there or something. I'm not exactly the mitzias of it. I gather that. Emevi and loy masuk, v'loy mevushel, not sweet, not mevushel, v'loy meushin, not right. The imhevi puzzle, and if you do bring it, it's puzzle. For the Gemara Ketani Reish Emevinas Alistoyim, which is sweet, v'imhevi kosher. Ravina karich v'tani. Put them together. Put the din of maslik and the din of. Now, what does that mean? Put them together in the kosher or put them together in the puzzle? Put listoyim and maslik together, right? Now, are you putting together, say, the kosher, or are you putting them together as puzzle? Let's see Rashi, guys. Rashi, the bottom Rashi, about 10 lines down. Karich v'tani, karich l'tani, halistoyin u'maslik b'hadadi. Put them together. V'tani b'trevayu imhevi puzzle. Rashi says you bring it the puzzle. Yes. Let's see Taisvis. Third Taisvis down. Karich v'tani lahachshir kamar. So Taisvis disagrees. In other words, Rashi went with the glass half empty. Taisvis went with the half full. That's the best way to explain it, right? The Simone Milsa, the simon to remember who said what. Okay, so Gishmak. So Taisvis says it's kosher, and Rashi says it's puzzle. Back in the Gemara. Rav Ashi Omar, no, Rav Ashi says they're consistent. In other words, listoyin is going to be kosher, but maslik is going to be puzzle. Gulya the shimsha, gulya, the sweetness that comes as a result of the sun, loy mois. It's not something. The wine is not mois. You see, guys, sweet wine wasn't something that was considered something kosher. So it didn't taste good, or it didn't intoxicate, whatever it wasn't good. But however, if it was from the sun, it was a halbat tzara. Chulya de pira, however, one that naturally gets sweetened without the sun, moyis, and therefore it's puzzle. So Rav Ashi is making a chilik. According to the first opinion, first time Ravina is saying they're the same. Whatever, you're not making a distinction between listoyis and maslik. Whatever the lach is going to be one is going to be by the other. Rav Ashi says no, listoyin is good and maslik is not good. Emevi yashan divrei Rabbi v'cham machshirin. You can't bring yashan from last year, but Rabbi says and the chacham say it's okay. Amar chiski, my time at the Rabbi that's not okay. Amar kra, the pasuk says lekeves yayin. Ma keves, just like, so we're making comparison between wine and a sheep. Ma keves ben shnasai, just like a sheep is a year old. Guys, a sheep after a year old is called an ayil, right? It's called a palgus between the 12th month. Then in the 13th month, it's now it's called a ayil. But just like a keves ben shnasai is a year old, afyayin ben shnasai, the comparison, so too wine should be a year old. Ima keves ben shtei shanim pasel, afyayin ben shtei shanim pasel, right? So maybe a keves ben shnasai is pasel. It's an ayil, it's a different animal. So maybe a 2-year-old wine should also be pasel. The chitema hachanami, you can say in the chanami it is pasel. Vatanya yayin ben shtei shanim lo yavi, you should not bring it. From heavy, if you do bring it kasha, says who's the one who says you shouldn't bring it? Rebbe. Because Amarim heavy kasha. kasha on Rebbe. Therefore, we're rejecting the comparison to kevesh, guys. Because of the kasha. Again, because of the kasha, just like a sheep 2 years old cannot be used for the tamim, it can't be used. Who adin mat? The wine shouldn't be able to be used. But we said if you use it, it's okay. So obviously, that's not the reason that yashan wine is no good. So what's the reason? Elamarova hainu time of the Rebbe dichsiv alteri yayin kis adam. So and the Rashi brings that it's not so. It loses that it's admimus. Let's look at Rashi, guys, on the right side down. Alteri yayin kis adam alma b'shas admimus mufcharhu. And when it's red, that's when it's mufchar. That's when it's choice quality. The Kimlon and the Chachamim gathered kisha'ava shnasai when a year passes, Iveris admimus, it's losing its what? Its redness. Ve'eno adam kol kach kishana rishona, it's not as red as the year before. It's interesting, guys. Interesting. So, yeah, so that's the reason that it's no good, because of its redness. But so therefore, Memela, if it's 2 years old, even if it's not as red, it still will be good, because you don't have the comparison to Kevesh to passel it. And that from what? From a kerem that was avud, tanakram avudim pamayim b'shana. It's worked twice a year, and I guess as a result, it's what. Therefore, it's not so. If the quality, you know what? I learned this Gemara. I thought it was a positive, guys. I thought working it, as twice a year was a positive. So yet over here, it seems it's not a positive. Let me see. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys. I learned I was right. You don't bring from the trestle, you do bring from the regulios, and you do bring from the kerem that was worth twice a year. It's not that you don't bring from, you do bring from that. Okay, so you do look back at the Mishnah. I had the brain freeze on this. Look, it says the Mishnah, right? You can't bring from the loyos. On the trestle, I guess it's not so good. Elamin harigilios, that's on the ground. Umin hakromim ha'avudim, and from kromim that are avudim, that you should bring from. What's a kerem that's avud? One that's worked twice a year. Now the Gemara brings a raya to that from a maisa. What's the raya? Rabbi Yosef have a karno de partisa. He had in a pardis, an orchard, and he had a corner of it. The Rafik Beit Fei Rivka. He went ahead and he did it often. He did it twice. The Ovid Chamra, and he had wine, the Dori Maya al Chatorin, that was able to go ahead and go 2 to 1 to the usual ratio. Guys, what's the usual ratio of wine to water? 3 to 1, right? Remember, 3 to 1. This was able to be 6 to 1. It was such high quality, it was able to be 6 parts water to 1 part wine. That's the pshat, not 2 to 1. 2 to 1 is not good. 3 to 1 is the norm. So therefore, this is twice 3 to 1. It's 6 to 1. They didn't put them in what? In big barrels. It was the middle. It was the Ludian barrels. That was the middle Ludian barrel. That's the size. And also, you shouldn't put what? Two together, but you put 1 to 1. Because so Rashi brings that it may go ahead. If one goes bad, the other barrel may sniff it, and it won't be good for the barrel. Ketzad boidik, how would you go ahead and check? Gizba yoshev, the gizba would sit there, and the guy would have the spigot. V'kana b'yada, he had a stick in his hand. Zarak agir and hikish b'kana. Tana, zarak agir shel shmarim, gizba hikish b'kana. The gizba hit him with a stick. V'lei malei meimar. Why didn't he speak to him? There's one say stop. Why are you hitting the guy? Or why are you hitting the barrel? Just say stop. Just like, right, right? You should go ahead and grind it when they made the katiris. So to over here, dibur is ra liayin. Dibur speak. It's like they say you speak to a plant, right? You speak. They say they hear it. I don't know. Right? You got to be a little positive, but it seems that voice for making wine, right, is not good. You have to speak to the winemakers. I wonder. I wonder if they speak to the winemakers what they would say about this. It's fascinating.
Is it
I'm sure,
by Katoris also? By
but
Katoris also.
but it's
Speaking of
good.
good, yeah.
Speaking is good. Over here, I meant Gutierrez. I said the Gutierrez is good, right?
Oh, so-
That's what I said. But I'm sure there'll be research done on this by some member on the screen about speaking to wine. This is by now we know what's right up his alley. What floats his boat. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yosef Yehuda says that kamachim is no good, right? He said if it has kamachim, it's no good. So boy, Rabbi Yochanan, we had the shaila a few times. Higdishu, let's say you magdish wine that has this mold in it. Maushi, well, you get malchus. We said like a balmum. Maushi yilakolav mishum balmum. Kivin the puzzle ke balmum dami. Dilma ain balmum elake behema. Where's this teku? Where's this teku again? We had this a few times. It's like the fourth time we're having the shaila. Okay, since we're discussing quality of carbonos and the accompanying for the carbonos, the shemen, the wheat. What about the animals? Where do we bring the animals from? Where are the choicest places for animals? So the Gemara, we conclude the parak with this Tan Rabbanon, Elim. You want rams, Moab. You go to Moab, they have good rams. Kvasim, you want sheep, Mechevron. You go to Chevron. It says like Avshalom fellas went to Chevron to begin. He told David he went to Chevron because he wanted to go bring karbanos to Hashem. And because why do you go to Chevron? Because they have the choice is what? The choice is sheep. That's the pshat there. Agolim, you want to bring calves, Misharoin from Sharoin. Goyzlis, you want to eat birds. Behar Melech. Rabbi Yudaimeh Meviin Kfasim Shegovon Kirachavam. You bring sheep that are as high as they are wide. As high as they are wide. In other words, they're zaftig. According to Tosis, ones who have broad backs. It's not speaking about that the equidistance, the height and the width, but rather the back is broad on the sheep. That was the highest quality sheep. Amar Rav Shila, my time with Rabbi Yehuda. Where's the source of Rabbi Yehuda that it's a wide back? The chsiv yire miknecha b'yomahu kar nirchav. The car is wide as the sheep is wide. It's they're fat, and you find so that we're okay. Since we mentioned a statement of Rav Shila, the Gemara, the parak concludes with it. Ksiv al Chaymesayach Yerushalayim. No one starts singing. Hifkarli Shemim Kalalayla, right? Kalayoyim v'Kalalayla. I pointed right day and night. Tamid lo yechashu. You should not be silent. Hamaskirim es Hashem al dami lachem. The Gemara explains. My Amri. What would they say? They're saying something. Don't be quiet. They're saying something. What are they saying? Amar Rav Shila. Ata Thokam Trachim Tzion. This is after what? This is after the destruction. They're saying to go ahead and bring the gula quickly. Rav Nachman Yitzchak would say, Boini Yerushalayim, go ahead and build it. Umei Kara. And before the Churban, what did they say? This is after the Churban. What did they say before the Churban? Mayavi Amri, Amar Rav Shila, Ki Bochar Hashem B'Tzion, Evil L'Moshav Loi. Ki Hashem chose Tzion, desired L'Moshav Loi, the ones who lived in it, and Hadron Allah Kol Kabanas had Tzibur, Hadron Allah Kol Kabanas had Tzibur, Hadron Allah Kol Kabanas had Tzibur. Okay, now Baruch Hashem, I know it's Hashem's gift to a Magid Shir. I had no pressure over Yontif whatsoever. It was so geschmack. Okay, now we're going to discuss the different measurements. Now we're going to go dry measurements, and then we'll discuss tomorrow the liquid measurements, the kalim of all the liquids, of all the nesachim and all the menachos. We again, Baruch Hashem, we're very familiar with this. Shtei miday shel yavesh chaya b'migdash. There were two kalim of dry measurements in the migdash. Isarain, one was an Isarain, the Chatzi Isarain, and one was a Chatzi Isarain, and we're going to see what they were used for. Reb Meir Omer, Isarain, there were two kalim, each one of an Isarain. Obviously, there must be some difference, or else they're the same kli. The Gemara will discuss the difference. The Chatzi Isarain. So according to the Tanakhama, there was only two kalim, one Isaron and Chatzi Isaron. According to Rabbi, there was two Esroinim, two kalim of Esroinim, and one Chatzi Isaron. Mahoyim Misham, Isaron Mahoyim Mishamesh. What was the Isaron used for? Sheboy Moide the Cholam Menachos. They would go ahead and all the Menachos. Now, some Menachos were more than one Isaron, guys. Some Menachos were more than one Isaron, yes? So Lehoyim Moide, Loi B'Shloisha Lepar, Shloisha Esroin Lepar, they didn't have a kli of three. You measured one three times. You measured one three times. But Loi B'Shel Shnayim, L'ayel. The ayel is two esrainim. You didn't measure one double. You measured two singles, right? Elamoided esrainim v'loy b'shel shnayim l'ayel. Elamoided din esrainis. Chatzi sarin mahayim mishamesh. What did they use that for? Shebo hayim moided chaviti kain gadol mechza b'bayko mechza bein harbayim. They would go ahead. You're going to ask me because you probably remember that the kain gadol came in Yisar and it was divided in half. So this was the chatz. This is how they measured the chatzah half. They measured half. In other words, they took borders in Isaron and they divided it, but they used this kli as the chatzi. Right? That's the Gemara is gonna say that. That's very geschmack. Tanya, Harameya Oimer, Ma Talmud Loimar Isaron lekevesa echad. What the pasuk says, Isaron lekevesa echad. Malamed sheshtei Yisrael hayu b'mikdash. There were two. Echad Gadosh, one was heaped, the Echad Machok, and one was Machok. In other words, the Keli that was Gadosh, the volume of the Kli was a bit smaller than the one that was Machok. Machok means it was leveled off. But they're both Esroinim. So this must have been smaller, and it was Gadosh, it was heaped above. And the chiddush is, despite the fact it's not in the kli itself, but it's in the airspace of the kli, it's still kaddish. It's still kaddish. These are klishares. It's still going to be kaddish, guys. Good. That's now he had to say this because there had to be some difference in the kli, guys. If it's the exact same volume, right? There's no. Then this. In other words, there had to be a physical difference in the kli, or else there's no purpose in it. So therefore, that's the purpose. Now, in Svara, guys, Godish is Geshmak. You take a look at it, it looks you're giving Berevach. Here, it's overflowing at the top. So it's Machok is that you want to make sure it doesn't spill over. But in other words, in a Svara, why would the Torah want this? To show that a person's giving, with ganzen hearts, as Kenny would say, right? You're giving completely over. The Godish Shaboy was what? Was my day. They used that for all Menachos. Again, Godish, all the Menachos, which just makes a lot of sense based upon the hezbollah that we just said. Amid Beis, Machuk, Shaboy Hayamoide Lechavite Kain Gadol. Right, that was right. And that was they used for the Chavite Kain Gadol, because it was divided into two. Right. It says in the Mefarish to the top. If you lechalik b'shnei chatzoi isaroin, from haya godish k'shahaya mitaltaloi lechatzoi haya mispazel gabe karka. Since guys, you have this, and you're going to divide this, right? If it was godish, it's right. So machuk is geschmack. It's not going to leave the kli because there's nothing beyond the confines of the kli. Mashenkin, if it's above the kli and you're carrying it, it may go ahead and disperse. A nice shot to make the chilik between the two, right? So in other words. Godish makes sense, fellas. Godish makes sense. It shows you're giving completely. Why would it be machok? Practically, for Chavite Kain Gadol, practically to ensure that it's not nispazar, it doesn't spread, keep it machok. Practical reason. Very geschmack. Shneimar, v'yisarin echad lekeves echad. The one yisarin for one keves. And came out Talmud Lamed, the pasuk of Rabbi of Rameya Isaron Isaron. L'Rabbi is Chatzi Isaron. You know why it says the two? To be married is a second kli, and that second kli is a Chatzi Isaron. Rameya Chatzi Isaron Minole. Fellas, Rameya who uses Isaron to tell me there are two kalim that contain an Isaron. Where does he know Chatzi Isaron from? Again, if the Chachamim learn it from the double lashon, and he Reb Meir is using the double lashon for two esroinim kli, where does he know chatzi got from? Where does he get that from? So nafkalei mivi'i sarin from the vav. For Rabbanon vav loy darshi, and the Rabbanon don't darshan that vav. So let's chazariba. We have machloikas between Reb Meir and the Chachamim. Loy Reb Meir there were two esroinim and one chatzi sarin. Loy the Chachamim there was a sarin what and a chatzi sarin. Each one bought a pasuk for each one bought a pasuk. What did the Chachamim learn from Reb Meir? They learned that what Isarin, that one was Isarin and one was a Chatzi Isarin. Where does Reb Meir know that from? Since he uses what? Both. He uses from the Vav, and the Chum don't darshan the Vav. Now, we need, what does Reb Meir do with the Chum's pasuk, guys? What does the Reb Meir do with the Isarin Echad, the Keves Echad, right? He says two, they say one. For Reb Meir, Haivi Isarin Echad, the Keves Echad, my Avidlei. What does Reb Meir do with the Isarin Echad, the Keves Echad? What does he do with that? You shouldn't go ahead and have a 3. You shouldn't have a 2. And that, but you go ahead and you use that 1 3 times for the par and 2 twice for the ayil. Rabbanon, where do they learn that from? Nafkalu minikudai. The Tanya, Rabbi Yosi, lama noked vav shebe emsa isarin shal isarin rishon shal yom tov. Why is a vav in the middle isarin of the first isarin on Yontav Rishon Shal Chag? Shlayim doy leibish shal gimel par leibish shal shnayim la'ayel Reb Meir and the kuda leidar. She doesn't dash in the kuda. Okay, guys, look at this. You know, you're chas chumash, but you don't see certain things. This is one of the things you're going to miss. This is Perek Chav Tes, Pasuk Tes Vav. It's speaking about the shiurim for the Nesachim. Guys, the Isarain. What do you see there? You see that little dot? You see this dot? You never see it in a million years. Look, there's one dot Isarain, and above that Isarain, there's another dot. You know what that's doing? It's going ahead and being mamayit. That what? You can't use 3, you can't use 2, you can only use 1. Isn't that crazy? It's in your chumash. Of course, you would never notice it in a million years. That little shtrickle is telling you there's a dot there. Baruch, look. This dot on the first Isaran, you see this dot over here? You got the dot that makes it an oi sound, and then there's a dot. That dot tells me that you can't use an Isaran you can't use an Isaran of 3 or the Isaran of 2. It's Mamayit. But you use an Isaran to 3 times or 2 times. Geschmack. I mean, you have to see it. And Rabbi doesn't dash in the dot. Fascinating. Just that. I love this. I love when you look it up and it's there. You know, like when it's not there. You know, when you look it up, it's not there. You know, I missed the boat, but that was it's there. It's a mafur shoatsko. You have to stop everything. Chatzi Sorim Hayim Mishamish. What did they use the Chatzi Sorim for? Right? Sheboy Hayim Moided Lechavite Kohen Gadol. There they would go ahead and they would measure out the Chavite Kohen Gadol. Now the Chavite Kohen Gadol was bought from the Sorim, and it was divided. Right? Moided Uriminu Aleshu Estera. Chavite Kohen Gadol Lehoya Boyin Chatzayin. It didn't come half and half. It didn't come Chatzi Sorim. Elamevi Isarin. It came as what? As a complete Isarin. Shalem, v'chaytzeyu, and then they divided it. So what do you mean? The Havmin the Gemara is that they brought in a Chatzi Isarin and a Chatzi Isarin. No. Rav Sheshes, my Moide Nami Diktani Mechalek. When it says measuring, it doesn't mean measuring, it means they divide it up. They would take the Kohen Gadol, they take the Isarin of the Kohen Gadol, and they divide it up half and half. Boy Minei Rami Bar Chama Merv Chisda. Chatzi Isarin LeReb Meir, Gadish Haya, a Moichik Haya. This Chatzi Isarin, according to Reb Meir. Now Reb Meir gave it a chilik, guys. He said what? There were 2 kalim. One was Gadish Isarin, and one was Machok. Now, we have Chatzi Isarin. Well, according to him, what's the right? According to him, what was that half? Was it Gadish or not? Was it Gadish or not? Says the Gemara, Simin, Chatzi, Chavite Shulchan. B'ti boilach l'Rabbanon. Why don't you ask the Rabbanon? Guys, the Rabbanon had one Isarin, correct? Why don't you ask if that Rabbanon was Gadash or Machak? Says the Rabbanon, l'Rabbanon Isarin Gufa Kami Boilahu. Gadash Haya Oy Machak Haya. Why don't you ask that? So Amalei, Midreb Meya Nishma, l'Reb Meya, Umidreb Meya Nishma l'Rabbanon. From Reb Meya we'll hear what Reb Meya holds, and from Reb Meya we'll hear what the Rabbanon hold. Midam Reb Meya Isarin Machak, Chatzi Isarin Nami Machak. When he said that Isarin was Machak, right? Guys, we said above, it's Geshmak. It wasn't Gadash because why? Because it would disperse, right? So you want to keep it contained. So when the Isarin was Machak, the Chatzi Isarin also was Machak. Because again, you want it to be, again, it has to be even, fellas. It has to be even. Right? It has to be even. And now we can hear from Reb Meir that the Chachamim also, when they say Isarin, it means Machak. Chavite kohen gadol b'ma mechalkon l'chales biyad oy b'kli. Now, we know there were 12 chalas. Guys, you might remember that the Chavite kohen gadol was, we learned out to lechem haponim, right? We learned out it's not 10 like the Menachos, but it's lechem haponim, it's 12. And how would they divide that up? So, biyad oy b'kli. Let's see Rashi, guys. B'ma mechalka, Rashi down below, 4 lines down where it gets right. B'ma mechalka, shemechalka isa. Rashi says they be mechalik the dough. Mechalik the dough. Tosfos says you mechalik the flour, fellas. You be aware it's machlokes, right? The Rambam says you mechalik the baked chalas. It means you have machlokes from ek to some ek. Tosfos says soilus. Rashi says dough, and the Rambam says what? He says the baked goods. Anyway, let's stay with Rashi. Shemachalik isa l'chalos shebo sheish chalis baboike v'sheish ben arbayim. Biyad, did you do it biyad beloy amida? In other words, if you did it biyad, it's going to not be exact. Oy b'kli nimdat b'mida, or with a kli, which you'll get a very exact measurement. Sham Menachos, this is what I wanted, fellas. Sham Menachos, the boys esa. Sham Menachos that came as 10 chalas and not 12. Pshitalon the sagi biyad l'chalkoi. It's poshut that you didn't need a kli; you could do it by hand. Leichbaslon imzu gedulim izu. We don't care if one's bigger than the other, so use your hand. Kiditanya b'shalhi elam menachos, as we learned at the end of Perek elam menachos. Kol menachos sheriba b'midas chalason or shemiyah b'midas chalason ksheros. We learned this, right? Any mincha that you were marba in one or diminished in the other, it's kosher. Chutz mi lechem aponim b'chavite kohen gadol. The lechem aponim l'hoisa ha'isa mischalekes. The chol chalish shnei esroinim hoisa. There was no chilik there. Each challah was made of 2 esroinim and nelusha and kol achas b'nei atzma. So we have a kasha by the lechem aponim. Guys, geshmak, it's a geshmak kasha. Lechem aponim, not. We want to know by the chavite kohen gadol. So Rashi explains, why is there a shiloh over here? Because we compare it to the lechem aponim. Fellas, we compare it to the lechem aponim. We know the lechem aponim, there was no midah, there was no hand, it was exactly to Shreinim. So maybe this is also a midah, or no, maybe it's similar to Menachos, where okay, says the Gemara, Pshita de biyad. It's pashit, they did it by hand. The ibekli to tani yachnis, would they bring a scale in? Would they bring a scale in? They wouldn't bring a scale in, right? Bring a scale in, and big deal. Says the Gemara, Kivin the beklala, since it's in the Teichacha, fellas, there's a klala. It says, Heshivu lachmechem b'mishkal. It's going to go ahead and crumble. Your lechem is going to crumble, and you're going to have to weigh it. Ksiv, lav ur cha'ara. Therefore, the only way to measure it would be with a kli. That kli is a scale. We don't want to measure it because of the klala, memela has got to be biyad. Shulchan mahu sheyagdish kematzin. What's the din of what? Of being machalik kamatzin. Rashi learns, we know, fellas, on the shulchan, guys, remember, you had the stacks of lechem aponim, and you had 2 bezichin of levina, 2 pots of frankincense. What happens if the frankincense is with not the pot? That's the way Rashi learns. Taisus learns, let's say the mincha is on the shulchan. We'll see with Rashi. Okay, the machlokes is Rashi and Taisus. Says Rashi, what happens? Does the shulchan have the capacity to be magdish that without the kli? Meaning, the shulchan we know is magdish the bread. We know it's magdish the bread. That's for sure. Is it magdish? Does it have to be magdish something that's not normally there? It's normally there in a pot. It's not normally there, not in a pot. So therefore, Rashi wants to know, according to Rashi, what's over here? May romer chomer because the shulchan maushi yagdish kamatzim begoy de shaloi. Midim magdish lechem kamatzim nami magdish. When it's magdish the lechem upon him, it's also magdish what the kamatzim. Dilma the chazile mekadesh. It's magdish what it's chazile what's seen to it, which is the lechem upon him. The loy chazile what's not seen to it, loy mekadesh. So that's the shaila of Rami Bar Chama. Amalei. So Rav Chisda told Rami Bar Chama, "Ein a mekadesh." It's not. It's not mekadesh. It's not mekadesh. Okay. Inni, is it really so? It's not mekadesh. For Rabbi Yochanan, L'divrei Omer. Let me give this to you outside. Let me give this to you outside. How far did the lechem upon him go up? According to one opinion, it went up 2.5. In other words, 2.5 high. We know it was 10 initially. It was 10 initially. So the width, we're measuring with an amar of 5. So you have 5 on the table, and the lechem upon him is 10. So if 5's on the table, I'm going to need another 5. So 2.5 and 2.5, a total of 10. Good, right? And then if you're going to count up 6 of them, it's going to be 15. Right, 6 times 1.5, 2.5, it's going to be 15. Good. If on the other hand it goes up 2, that means you're going to measure with 6. So 6 is over here. You have 4 left over. That will give you 2 and 2, and it goes up. The kasha is, it's magdish what? We know it's magdish the bread. So why do you tell me it's magdish? It must be magdish something else. It must be magdish the kamatzim, the bezichin that's there without pots. That's the Gemara's kasha. Says the Gemara. Inni, is it really so that you're telling me that the kamatzim, that it's not magdashit, that the lechem upon him was doubled up to heights of 5. The shulchan is magdish 15, right? 6 times 2.5. Tefach l'mayla. The divrei oimet tefchayim kaifel, it was 2. Nimsa shulchan magdish yud based tefachim. 6 times 2 is 12. L'mayla. And guys, obviously what? It's magdish. It's not speaking about the bread. It must be speaking about something else. Look at Rashi. Four lines up from the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. L'divrei oimet tefchayim ba'ama b'shisha tefachim nimsa al shulchan. Rabbi Yochanan al karchach. Right, this is 3 lines up. Rabbi Yochanan al karchach b'shar mili kamar. He must be speaking about other things. Kigoyin kamotzim, the mekadesh lu goydish, the shulchan. That it's the goydish is magdashit, right? It's magdashit. The shulchan, the iba lechem, because if what? If it's the lechem, atu ad hashtala yadina, the shulchan magdash lahu. In other words, what are you telling me over here? Fellas, eye contact. You know the shulchan, right? You know the shulchan is magdish the bread on it. So you're telling me over here, it's not it's magdish the. If it's magdish the bread, it's magdish 12, it's magdish 15. Obviously, it's telling me something else that you didn't know, right? It obviously must be what? Something that you didn't know. What didn't you know? That it's magdish what? Kamatzim. That's the kasha on Rav Chisda. That he wants to say it's not mekadesh. On that, Gemara answers, I'm like, ain't mekadesh the korev. It's not mekadesh that you could be makvid on the mizbeach and be mata the lechem upon him. Avon mekadesh livsol. If it's full yom, in other words, it is mekadesh, but not completely. It's mekadesh. Remember, we spoke about half kadesha. It's not kaddish to the extent that it full kaddish is a goof to go ahead and put on the mizbeach, but it's mekadesh to the extent that it's full yom would touch it, or if yoitza, if it went out, psul yoitza, that it's mekadesh for that point. Okay, we'll stop over here.